Good afternoon. Today is the 13th day of February 2016, and our continuing series Explorations in Savitri with Alokbhai. Namaskar. And today we will complete Canto 4 of Book 2, and as always I read something from, this time, Nirodhabaran on Sri Aurobindo and Savitri. He writes, "At this time the press sent up a demand for a new book. Future poetry was given the preference, and a chapter was actually written. But as some books on modern poetry needed to be consulted, it was shoved aside. He said, 'Let us go back to Savitri.' Again, the same two cantos. The symptoms of the disease had not abated, though fortunately they had neither increased. There were temporary improvements now and then, but in the course of the disease did not seem to disturb him at all in his work. His whole attention was now focused on Savitri, for which we could but spare about 2 hours at the most. So the progress had to be slow, especially as he had to dictate and depend on another's sight to be guided in his movement. Now came the call from the bulletin for an article. That over, the correspondence and miscellaneous writings swelled up to such an extent that he was at last obliged to remark, 'I am finding no time for my real work.' Then the path got fairly clear, and I was wondering what would be the next choice when, looking away, he declared, 'Take up Savitri. I want to finish it soon.' The last phrase was a bombshell on my ear. Finish it soon? What on earth? I asked myself. To be continued. Page 149.
Yes. And we'll start with a line at the end of page 148. So what we see with Sri Aurobindo is it's a method both in his prose writings as well as in poetry, that he will start with an overview, fill in the details, and then round it off with a kind of summary. It's a pattern throughout. And again, when he starts the next chapter, each chapter will be like that. And when he will start the next chapter, again he will in a way, in a certain sense, summarize what has gone past. And then toward the end, again, there will be a rounding off. So now we are entering that portion where he is rounding off the kingdoms of the little life.
And I find it so touching to me that even in those passages where things are very dark, there'll come 4 or 5 lines that lift us up.
Yes, not only that, throughout, even when he's describing the darkest thing, and this is something very amazing, if one is attentive, one can even there touch a core of bliss and a core of light. And that's because basically even the darkness that is being described by the light that is seeing it. So there is the presence of the light, and that light brings bliss.
Yes.
Always I used to wonder, in Indian thought we have these 9 rasas, in fact 10 of them. So rasas are the essence in creation. So in drama there is a lot of importance given to the rasas. And one of the rasas is vibhats, the weird, the repugnant. It's very difficult to have an exact English equivalent of vibhats. It's not something which you want to see. It's horrible. And yet it is a rasa. So who would want to see, and what is the rasa in it? So in Mahabharata you see passages where you have the vibhats, which are, you can feel a kind of subtle joy inside. Not the joy of those who enjoy that. That's a different kind of a perverse joy. But a joy which goes to its essence and sees the truth behind it. So in Savitri, throughout, this joy is there because this light is there, this truth is there. And truth beauty and bliss are one. They are basically accompaniments of each other. That's why truth, which is harsh and joyless, something is amiss there. It brings beauty and bliss. It's part of its. So we start from few lines on page 148.
In the allotted?
Uh,
No,
yeah,
a
the very
little
next
joy,
line. Yeah.
a little joy.
A little joy and knowledge satisfied this little being tied into a knot and hung on a bulge of its environment. A little curve cut off in measureless space, a little span of life in all vast time. So this is the little life. Little life is not necessarily by the size, but by the smallness of its aims and smallness of the littleness of the consciousness. And as is the consciousness, so is the life. The aims are small, the joy is small, the knowledge is small because the consciousness is small and narrow. A thought was there that planned, a will that strove, but for small aims within a narrow scope, wasting unmeasured toil on transient things. A remarkable line.
Yes.
So, whenever people say, oh, yoga is very difficult and all this, so one of my counter question is life easy? As simple as that. As human beings, we spend so much time and energy on things which at the end of the day are of really no consequence.
Yes.
Look at the effort that human beings put into just sustaining their family. And at the end of it, well, it's the pyre or the grave. So it's amazing, and the problem is that this little life cannot even understand that there is a greater scope. That is the irony. That is the sad part of it. It doesn't know. So it lives in a tragic state without knowing it's a tragic state. Perhaps it's a kind of grace. That's why they say ignorance is bliss, because you don't know what you're missing. So it knew itself a creature of the mud. So convenient to believe that we are nothing but waves on time's seas, to believe that we are nothing but, mud houses, and that's what this believes. It asked no larger law, no loftier aim. It had no inward look, no upward gaze. This is how Sri Aurobindo defines the little life.
Yeah.
So greatness and littleness have nothing to do with external achievements. It is a state in which we live. So wherever there is a larger aim, an upward look, an inward orientation, there is greatness. It may be in a person who has never been educated, who is, doesn't know how to dress well, cannot speak very well, but yet there is greatness. Someone like Sri Ramakrishna Paramahansa and countless saints and sages. But wherever the aims are small, wherever the consciousness is small, wherever one lives on the surface of life and lives for the surfaces of things, understands only the surfaces, there is smallness. So how beautifully Sri Aurobindo defines it. It knew itself a creature of the mud. It asked no larger law, no loftier aim. It had no inward look, no upward gaze. This larger law, it's very interesting. So very often in life we confront situations, circumstances, people, issues which we cannot understand based on our understanding. So very often we draw back into our shell and feel miserable about it. But perhaps we need to ask why it is so. What is the greater truth? What is the larger law? And then, it discloses itself before us. But very often we see things from that limitation, and that's the end of the story. So larger law. How Yagnavalk asks that Satya Dharmaya Drishtaye, show me that law of truth. I don't see it manifest on earth. Show me what is divine sense of justice. So divine sense of justice, of course, is very beautiful. It's instantaneous. He doesn't let you spend a lot of time and money on the courts. It's instantaneous. If you are doing something which is in tune and harmony with the greater law, you immediately experience joy and peace inside. Immediately he gives you that. And if you are doing something contrary to that, you feel inside so unhappy and miserable. So he is the only one who doesn't delay in justice. And people very often say, divine justice delayed in coming. No, that may be the final culmination, the axe which finally falls. But look at the misery in which people live when they are not tuned to the inner truth. And then it's a very wonderful line. A backward scholar on logic's rickety bench. As if backward is not enough.
Yeah, but the bench has to be rickety.
Bench too has to be rickety. And it's such a wonderful description, apt description of what logic is. It's purely based on your presumptions, which keep changing. So, it's always unsteady. It swings this way, swings that way. And backward scholar on logic's rickety bench, indoctrinated by the erring sense. So already these premises have been fed into it by the erring sense. They don't show us the full truth.
Yeah.
They are the real mischief makers. They show us only portion of the truth. And we believe this is it. I have seen, so I believe. I have heard, so I believe.
Yes.
Worst is when I hear and I believe. Heard from this, that, finally trace it and one believes it and forms an opinion. And then they condition the mind. And then the mind weaves or conjures a world. It took appearance for the face of God. For casual lights the marching of the suns. I think God's labor Sri Aurobindo says that a little truth is their only scope. Man lights his little torches of hope. And what does he choose? Or a demon altar choose. And he uses these torches of hope and lights them on a demon altar. A small inn is his ultimate scope. No, there's one more line and then he says, and in his pilgrimage. A narrow truth is his only scope and in his pilgrimage. So like when you go on a pilgrimage which is far off in distance, you have inns on the way.
Yeah.
So many of these inns will also have some little god, some little, So you go there and say, hi, this is so nice. I have found it. So that's how man lights his little torches of hope. For casual lights, the marching of the suns. For heaven, a starry strip of doubtful blue. You see, who says that there is no humor in Savitri?
Really?
There is so much humor. So subtle, so profound. Aspects of being feigned to be the whole. So, there was a voice of busy interchange. Once again, television channels have been anticipated. There was a voice of busy interchange, a marketplace of trivial thoughts and acts. Marketplace. So that's how markets anyways are. Trivial thoughts and place and acts. A life soon spent, a mind the body's slave. Here seemed the brilliant crown of nature's work. There is so much of humor in it. And the person believes, I am someone or something. Walking into a branded showroom, buying a very expensive thing for himself, and believes that I am someone or something. And Sri Aurobindo says, here is the crown of nature's work. Brilliant crown of nature's work. And tiny egos took the world as means to sate awhile dwarf lusts and brief desires. So this is what is called as the asura in Indian thought. A tiny being, a small, maybe a rudiment of a soul, but a gigantic ego, darkness surrounding it. It wants the whole world as its means. And its only objective is to sate dwarf lust and brief desires. In a death-closed passage, saw life's start and end. So this is how we see that every day it is night that vomits out the sun and swallows it back. This is our earthly vision of reality. But if we care to go out or dare to go out, we'll see, no, sun is not swallowed by the night or, vomited by it. But night is when we turn away from the sun. Sun is the only reality, resplendent all around. As though a blind alley where creation's sign, As if for this, the soul had coveted birth in the wonderland of a self creating world and the opportunities of cosmic space. So, this for those who believe that, there is only one life and everything is decided there. But when cosmos is your field, how can one brief life with, birth as a human start and end in the grave can be the ultimate crown of nature's work? There has to be something more, something much more.
And that line, much more than a star above a cradle and
Cradle
a grave.
and a grave, exactly. It's a good reminder to all of us. Otherwise, we think, oh, that's the end of things. Death closed passage. This creature passionate only to survive, fettered to puny thoughts with no wide range, and to the body's needs and pangs and joys, this fire growing by its fuels, death. So, what is the fuel? Very interesting. All the desires that we pour into, and this body, this fire, this is the vital, this little life is imaged like a fire. And what is this fire is doing? It is not refining or purifying, it's just destroying. It's a fire which draws from the body and destroys it, weakens it. So when we live by this kind of this for these brief dwarf lust and desires, brief desires, slowly it disintegrates the body, it finishes it off. So that's how it is being described.
But the fire is growing.
Yes,
by
fire
the
is
fuel's
growing.
death.
Exactly. So the desires remain unsatiated, momentarily satisfied. The lusts increase, but the body becomes weaker and weaker. So this is the kind of an average human life. And at this level, one is aware only of the body's needs and pangs and joys. This fire growing by its fuels, death, increased by what it seized and made its own. It gathered and grew and gave itself to none. So the more it swallowed, it thought it will be satisfied, the more there was greed. And the more it swallowed and the more the greed grew. So it was like, that story of Midas touch gold. And many such stories are there which basically indicate it. So as Sri Aurobindo says in one of his aphorisms, there are only two perfect ways of quietening. One is to either transcend desire or to satisfy them. And Mother gives a very beautiful commentary that to satisfy is impossible. But he puts it as a logical proposition because that's how many people will say. This famous movement which was started by Rajneesh. So he used to say that,
Yes.
that you must first satisfy these things, then only you can go. So even strangely, a name to reckon with in psychological circles, Abraham Maslow. So he creates a hierarchy of needs and he says you have to go step by step. So once you satisfy these needs, then next need, then finally the self-transcendent needs come. But it has been shown that in the lives of truly those who have transcended themselves, they didn't follow this curve. It is something else which we don't understand. Probably we can use the word factor X. For various reasons it enters the life and then everything changes. That occupies even if all else is not satisfied.
Because I just received an email, and where Mother says it has to be all done at once. You cannot take it step by step.
Yes.
Achieve this, conquer this, do this.
She speaks of that in the context of the mystics. That she says the mystics were right when they said you have to change the whole clothing, not wash it, stain one by one the stains. Yes. You can't do it. It will get torn. By the time you are washing the 10th stain, the first one has begun to grow. It's the same story like the Aegean stables.
Yes.
So you can't clean, by the time you clean one, the 10th one has started. So you have to do it by a total change, the reversal of consciousness. That's why the stress should be on the positive side of sadhana, which is to grow in peace, to discover the psychic being, to come in more and more communion with the divine, then the rest follows. But if we try to do it with our darkness, struggle with all this, it doesn't work out. Because these things can multiply endlessly. They are like a hydra head, Medusa. All these stories are so symbolic.
And for us to offer it to the mother.
Offer it to the mother. That's the best path. Mother herself says that there are two ways you can do it. One is by rejection, the second by offering. And then she says, personally, I prefer the offering method. She says that. But there was something that it also hoped. Only it hoped for greatness in its den. You know, it reminds me of family photos. I don't know. You see the patriarch sitting like a royal king. And then his great pride. You know, my grandfather. So what? But that's my grandmother. And then, if you are not very enthusiastic, they will also describe, he owned a very huge shop in Connaught Place. Those days, Now, it's not interesting, But it's a whole, you see the family picture in Indian societies, definitely it's very prominent. And you will see the person is so proud about that. Even family may have nothing special about it, but that's my family picture. And people put. We are born for realizing the whole world as one family, not only human beings, but as Savitri takes the life of bird and beast and men all into her own.
Yes.
That's our potential. But greatness in a little den. I am the boss of the house and I will lord over everyone. So, and pleasure and victory in small fields of power. Getting promotion in the company one is working. So that's what is little life. Or probably in the ashram context, becoming a head of department. Well, little life is everywhere. You can't, becoming an in charge. I am someone special. It's the same truth, which is, and mother has to work on all things, so it's everywhere. And conquest of life room for self and kin.
Oh, there it is.
I am liberated, now all my family members should also be. Let's get a gate pass for everyone. In spirituality, it doesn't work. So, an animal limited by its feeding space. I mean, this is marvelous.
Really?
These are things we see, but we never look at it like that. That's the beauty of truth light. It's showing us what we see and yet see not. It's a very nice little Zen story. He says, what is truth sight? He says there are three stages of truth vision. So what is the first stage? When we see the tree as a tree, when we look at the sea as a sea, when we look at the stone as a stone. Okay. Second stage, when we look at the tree and we do not see the tree. When we look at the stone and do not see the stone. When we look at the sea and do not see the sea. Third stage, when we look at the tree, we see a tree. When we look at the stone, we see a stone. It's like a Zen story. Now, we have seen all this. We have seen animals, but we have never got this wonderful message. See, this is Veda in earth. So, Veda is everywhere. Veda is not just some book written in a sacred place and with 1 lakh verses, whom some Pandits worship. That is part of the Veda. But Veda is an unfinished book. The day Veda is finished, it will no more be sacred. It will be like any other book in the world. So, this large part of Veda still not uncovered. It's written in matter. So, this is Veda. Satyavan is described as a Veda knower of the earth.
Yes.
So, without reading the Vedas, this is Veda. That when you look at an animal, you see, this is an animal limited by its feeding space. And then look at our own life. That am I also limited by my feeding space? It knew not the immortal in its house. It had no greater, deeper cause to live. Living to eat. So much so that mother had to remark once during one of her talks when she said, speaking about the state of affairs of humanity, that people asked me what it will be in the supramental world and all that. And she said, the person asked, what about food? She said, we don't have to worry about it because, we will no more need to eat.
Oh, yeah.
And the person said, then it will be so miserable. you know, perhaps that must have inspired her to put that message. Eat for living, do not live for eating. Because some people felt, oh, it will be very boring if we won't have something to eat. And she observed that and, spoke about it in the class. That this is the state in which we as human beings live.
And there's that humorous story of Nishikanto
Yes.
with all the girls.
Yes.
He gets all the girls to have these little bags,
Yes.
and they have to go to mother and say, fill it with groundnuts in the playground, all for him. But
Yes.
mother caught him.
Yes, mother caught him. Mother caught him in a very interesting way. This theft he escaped. But in the playground, once he said, all people are standing in a row. So he put one hand and mother gave. So what he did was, he went around the other person and put his other hand. And if you saw the mother, distributing it, it was very fast. The mother's movements were amazing, sometimes electrifying. So she would put it, at a real speed. She wouldn't be even looking at the person. But the moment she went there, she stopped and looked, Nishikanto. So that's how Nishikanto was caught. But he remained an incorrigible foodie. Well, there is an incorrigible part in humanity. In limits only it was powerful, acute to capture truth for outward use. Look at this. Its knowledge was the body's instrument. So Sri Aurobindo's yoga, because it will make me physically immortal. Then there are things like that, yes. One of the things when I came here early and someone came to me and I said, I got just curious. And I asked him, why did you come here? Because, I used to get a bit interested, sometimes even weird things you see. So he said, why? I have come here to become immortal. So I said, that's a very astounding aim. But why do you want to become immortal? He said, because I am very afraid of death. Someday I keep worrying if I sleep, I'll die. I said, what mother has said that to conquer, to become immortal, first thing to conquer is the fear of death. So are you sure you are in the right place? No, he says, this is the only yoga which can make me immortal. So, truth for outward use. It's not that kind of immortality. That is a crown and final consequence. But sometimes one uses the yoga for outward end. So all knowledge it used for only outward use. Absorbed in the little works of its prison house. We never look at our own house as a prison. And of course, even psychologically, we live in a prison. So it turned around the same unchanging points, in the same circle of interest and desire, but thought itself the master of its jail. What a wonderful sense of humor. Because naturally in the jail, when there is no one else, you are the master. And whoever else comes, 2 or 3 persons, they have to obey you. So, you are the master of your jail.
I think it's Dylan Thomas who writes at the end of his poem, I think it's Fern Hill, he says, and I sang in my chains like the sea.
Yes. I think that's the secret truth also about, of course, in a very profound way, about Prometheus who was tied because he brought fire. So it's, this tying is a kind of prison in which you are confined because you have stolen the fire. But then it's much profound because it's done so that the whole thing can change. So he is given this fate, seemingly a punishment, but eventually something which will transform all things. That story is a very remarkable story. Although for action, not for wisdom made, thought was its apex or its gutter's rim. What it thought was its apex, capacity of thinking, was nothing else but the gutter's rim, because it was living a life in a gutter. Sri Aurobindo is someone has said he is a very perfect gentleman. So Sri Aurobindo is saying it in a very gentlemanly way, that this little life is a life in the gutter. But he is saying it so beautifully. Thought was its apex or its gutter's rim.
Yeah.
It saw an image of the external world and saw its surface self, but knew no more. Out of a slow, confused, embroiled self-search, mind grew to a clarity cut out precise, a gleam enclosed in a stone ignorance. So now this what we were reading was in the little life, these three layers, and the last one, the third creation, was where mind has just entered. So there is a kind of rudimentary thought which has started, but only for outward use, only for limited purposes. It is limited within a small range, but yet slowly it's an effort of the creature to come out of ignorance. So Sri Aurobindo never passes a final judgment of anything. So look at this. In this bound thinking's narrow leadership, tied to a soil, inspired by common things, attached to a confined familiar world, amid the multitude of her motived plots, her changing actors and her million masks, life was a play, monotonously the same. So, this change was also the same within limits. Like, people change food, they change dress. This is how fashion is. Fashion is about that. But there is another kind of fashion, inner fashion. And that's what Mother and Sri Aurobindo speak about, changing the whole dress, changing the whole, material, and not just cleaning it and putting patchworks. And the real adventure. That's why people who believe that spirituality is an escape, they really don't know. They don't know life, and they don't know spirituality. Spirituality is the greatest possible adventure, because after you have conquered, because in outer space, when you take an adventure, even Everest, there is a point, there are coordinates, there is an end point. But in spirituality, the landscape is infinite. There is no limit for it. You are grappling with things which are unseen, subtle, here caught, there missed. So it's a tremendous adventure, and that's why she says that I call those who have the spirit of an adventure, who want to strive for the unknown, unseen, unheard, unfelt, ungrasped. So it's a far greater adventure than, trekking the same ground.
Book 1, first canto, the adventure of consciousness
Adventure
and joy.
of consciousness and joy. That's right. Very first page. There were no vast perspectives of the spirit, no swift invasions of unknown delight, no golden distances of wide release. That's the limit of experience of this life. Even though the mind has begun to come, a glint of it, though eventually all this will come, this wideness, this largeness, this delight. And then this master stroke, this petty state resembled our human days. So that's what much of human life is about. But fixed to eternity of changeless type. A moment's movement doomed to last through time. So many times, one wonders that, and Mother says, this is the aspiration I am trying to communicate. If you look at really this human life at the end of the day, whatever goodness you may accumulate, whatever you may achieve outwardly, but look at this clothing and the imperfection that dogs us at every step. The very dress that we wear, physical matter, is prone to decay, disintegration, disease. And the Mother at one place says, everything else I can accept. And then she says that how she has prayed for abolishing all this that is perverse, etc. But she says, one thing is still horrifying to me. It is to see the disintegration, the decay, the diseases that set inside. It is really, it's not a worthy dress for the inhabitant. So, but human life is woven around. It's like it ties us, clamps us down.
I might say here also Shakespeare's reflection. So it's so close to this. Tomorrow and tomorrow, yes, and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace to the last syllable of recorded time.
Beautiful.
And all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Wow. See,
absolutely.
To last, A moment's movement dawned, doomed to last through time.
An eternity of changeless type.
Yeah.
Existence, bridge-like, spanned the inconscient gulfs. A half-illumined building in a mist. So these bridges, or it's like in darkness, in fog and mist, you see some buildings here and there. It's not a bridge between the highest and the lowest. A half-illumined building in a mist, which from a void of form arose to sight and jutted out into a void of soul. That's how one sees it. A little light in a great darkness born. The first stir of mind, a little light in a great darkness born. Life knew not where it went, nor whence it came. Around all floated still the nascent haze.
Thus ends this canto.
This canto, and when
I
we
wanted
start,
I wanted to ask if you would say just a few words. We have this very, very interesting in all these forthcoming cantos. Here we have the kingdoms of the little life.
Yes. And
Then we have the Godheads of the little life.
Yes.
Then we have the kingdoms and the Godheads of the greater
yes,
life.
yes.
Kingdoms and Godheads of the little mind.
and
Kingdoms and Godheads of the greater mind.
yes.
And then only kingdoms
Kingdoms,
of the
yes.
greater knowledge.
Yes, because there it is the formless one who is multitudinous.
Yes.
But basically, all these kingdoms have not just sprung out of a mechanical movement of Prakriti. Behind each kingdom, there is the Godhead and the Godheads which sustain these powers, which are master of these energies. And this is right, in the Tantras, in Indian tradition, these are called as Shudra Devtas, and there's another term for the higher gods. So all these are Godheads, means the divine has limited himself. There are many aspects which have come out, and even in these planes, in a very limited way, that limitation, self-limitation of the infinite, he governs these energies. So this is a great secret he reveals when he speaks about the Godheads, because that gives us a deeper understanding, and even though here it is not revealed, hinted at, even ways of manipulating these energies at this level. Because in Tantra they do this, because these energies are everywhere. So what do? You master these Godheads. So we see that, there are people who do miracles, like whatever sweet you want, there is a Babaji, by the way. So if people go to this Babaji, he will immediately say, what do you like to eat? He will say that, I like this sweet from Moscow. So he'll say, okay, here it is. And in a moment, the sweet will come. So normally these things are done because you have in your command and control these Godheads. So these Godheads are the governing masters of this realm. And in this realm itself, there would be separate movements. Like in the little life, there would be lust, there would be anger, there would be jealousies, all these. And for each, there would be a Godhead. And this Godhead has the power over these energies. So in actual yoga practice, it has a great relevance, because unless you finish the Godhead, or unless you go past the Godhead, if you manipulate only the energies, it's not enough.
You're caught.
You are caught. You see, it's like slaying the Medusa.
Mm-hmm.
So, we know the story of Perseus. He's given this task. Unless you do it, and there is a way to do it, you can't get past. Again, with the termites, you have to go back to the mother queen, to the queen and the mother of termites. Unless you finish her, you may kill the termite, but they will keep on emerging. Because all these Godheads derive eventually their power from the infinite. Also, all these things about spirit of the species, they are like Godheads. So you have the Godheads of the trees. So there are some people who directly have a rapport with these Godheads, water nymphs. And if they have a rapport with these, and they're very nice names about these godheads. In the subtle physical world, we have the dryads and naiads. The same thing. There also he speaks about the godheads, but he doesn't use the word. So if you are in rapport with them, then that entire species you can master. So this is really the path to mastery and not the other way around. And of course also a path with which you can come in harmony with all these beings. So it's a different world which opens when he describes the godheads. There are beings who enjoy creating accidents. Now otherwise we think, okay, accident is a question of play of forces. But how do we eventually master accidents? So you have to go one way is that you become more conscious. This is one way. The other is that if these godheads are subordinated, tamed. Now in Tantra it is done differently. In Sri Aurobindo's yoga it's by surrendering to the mother. So she and Sri Aurobindo had to master all these beings. Then only they could command, with sovereignty upon their children, their disciples, because they command these beings. The story of the vital beings who came and threw
The stones.
Yes.
Yeah.
So these are the little godheads.
Yeah.
They have power, but their power is to throw stones. And mother asked them that, when they said, okay, you tell us, we will serve you. And then she asked, what can you do? Throw stones. He said, I'm not interested. And then she says, if they could manifest flowers, I may have been interested. And then the Kali of Virampatnam. So people went to that place thinking it is Kali. But she was feeding on people's desires and growing. So this is a whole occult side which we discover. Not just the energies, but a whole occult side. And she said, you and me can form a pact. So this knowledge which he will reveal subsequently through the Godheads is a very occult and profound knowledge which has been lost to modern mind. Modern mind can accept energies. It will say, yes, there are physical worlds, vital worlds. Even among Sri Aurobindo's disciples, they now, we have the terminology. So people speak about physical world, vital world, mental world. But you speak about the Godheads. This is the resistance. It's the same thing like, you can believe that there is a formless, universal consciousness. But the moment you say it's a being, there is a problem. Because, then you have to surrender your little personality to another being. And Sri Aurobindo gives this aphorism that, when I went before a personal God, beyond the personal God, I found the impersonal, the truth of Maya. But then I followed him further, beyond Maya, and there I found my Krishna as the transcendent divine. So this aspect of being, and out of that being, many, many beings emerging into creation, it's a very, very important aspect which is something to which modern mind particularly doesn't refer to. I am the only being. Yes. All others are energies. Safer. That's what we'll see. Thank you. Leave it.